Hello, everyone. Before we dive into today's episode, I wanted to remind you that my book, Drummers on Drumming, is available now on Amazon as both a paperback and an ebook. Based on the Big Fat Five segment of this podcast, where I sit down with my favorite drummers to discuss the 5 records and stories that shaped their approach to the instrument, this book is packed with insights from the drummers who redefined how we think about the modern drum set. You can grab your copy now by checking the link in this episode's show notes or simply searching Drummers on Drumming on Amazon. So thank you for all the support, and now let's get into the show. What is up? Welcome back to the Drum Panel, not Big Fat Five. So this is part 2 of my conversation with, or our conversation, my and Eric's conversation with Chris Mazzarisi for the Drum Panel episode 2, part 2. Anyways, I have a lot of these already backlogged with lots of fun guests, so I think the Drum Panel is going to be something that I look forward to the most. And anyways, here we go. I'm going to stop talking. Bye. When you're overcritical of gear, you're actually revealing your own lack of skill. Thoughts, boys?
I do feel like certain pieces of gear have their own sound and vibe. Like a bop kit, for example. I'm not going to play what I would typically play on my like regular rock-tuned kit. I'm not going to play like a typical ride pattern on a clap stack, you know? So every kind of different piece of gear kind of invokes something different. I do think there's maybe some gear that's probably, I don't know, less inspirational than others, but...
Yeah, I guess I interpreted this as that critical thing, well, no pun intended, but the critical word critical. So if you're overly critical of gear, so my interpretation of that, what that person was saying was the person that says, man, those tamas suck. Like, I'll never play a tama. Yeah. It's like, I mean, if you close your eyes and you didn't know what kind of drum kit it was, I'm sure you could make a tama sound good and be happy with it. So a good drummer shouldn't say this piece of gear is dog shit because, okay, maybe the Iron Cobra, I don't know why I'm hung up on tama. Maybe the Pearl Eliminator, I like tama. Maybe the Pearl Eliminator isn't your cup of tea. You'd rather play a DW 3000. But to say like, oh, the Eliminator's a shit pedal, it's like, really?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a difference between exactly. There's a difference between it's bad and it's not for me. That's what I always say.
I interpreted that question totally different from both of you guys too. I kind of just got the idea of the person saying that cheaper drums maybe just won't sound as good as more expensive drums, and I think yeah, you can have a badass guy sit down to a cheap drum kit and make it just sound incredible, you know. I've told this story a couple times to friends, and it's not drums, it's guitar. Sorry for my guitar references, but I went to go see a band play many, many years ago. The guitar player is this guy, Jared Scharf, who played in a band, Carbondale. They were a band from New York. I think they were kind of about to explode and just, I don't know, I guess some record label nonsense happened. He ultimately went on to become the guitar player for Saturday Night Live for a very long time. But I remember seeing them in a club on Long Island and thinking, wow, this guy has the most insane guitar tone I've ever heard. Like, he's just incredible, this guy. Just shredding solos. Show's over, actually looked at his gear. The dude's playing like a $300 Mexican Stratocaster, a transistor cheap Fender guitar amp, and just a tuner. It's all in the fingers. You know? Man. And I think the same thing with drummers too. It's all in the feel. It's like, I think there's like a weird trend going on right now where drummers are using just cheap garbage like hi-hat cymbals and just making them sound so cool. Just digging in. So I think it's all the feel. That's the way I interpret it, is like a cheap drum kit kind of vibe. Yeah. I love like a beginner kit. So
it's like, doesn't Jack White play like notoriously terrible guitars because he loves the idea of like struggling to like make music is exciting for him.
It's like they're cheap guitars, I think, like Japanese guitars.
Yeah.
All right, this one's fun. And I kind of agree with it. Snare and floor toms should be flat, not angled. I'm going to go with rack toms too on this. What is everyone's deal with like...
I actually have obnoxiously strong opinions on this one.
I know, that's why I assumed. So please, go ahead.
I apologize in advance. All right, this is probably...
Eric is rubbing his forehead right now, looking down. Just so everyone knows.
I'm like embarrassed about how passionate I am about this subject. It relates entirely to how high you sit and how high you like your drums.
Okay.
If your snare drum and tom should totally be flat, but if you sit really low and you like your snare drum really high, it doesn't work. It's not good. You're going to hurt yourself. If you sit really high and you like your snare drum really low, don't put them flat. It's not going to work. You're going to crank your wrist back and you're not going to get a full range of motion. So to me, I'm trying to think of how to explain this in an audio medium. But the higher you sit and the lower your drums are relative to how high you sit, your drum should be angled towards or away from you. So for example, like we'll use like 80s Lars Ulrich, the kind of wall of toms. Sit super low. You got to have your drums face towards you in order to like get a full range of wrist motion.
So it's all about the motion of the wrist. It's not about aesthetics. It's not about anything else. This is the angle you're coming at.
Well, I mean, it starts from how high or low you prefer your seat height, and then how high or low you prefer your drums relative to that. So like for toms, for example, if you have a 24-inch kick drum and you like to sit really low, you can't have your first rack tom flat. Like it's not possible. You're going to be lifting your shoulder up above your head to try and hit that drum in the first place. So you like physically have to angle it towards you. So it's all relative to what is going to give you the full range of wrist motion, so you don't hurt yourself.
If you had a student come in and say they're a really good drummer, they just kind of, for whatever reason, they come to you, they want to get better, and they have their rack tom up pretty high, and they make it sound good. It doesn't look like they're hurting. They're maybe older. They don't have any wrist issues.
Sure.
And they're like, I don't know. Like I've tried to angle it just doesn't feel good. Would you, as an instructor, maybe kind of push him to be like, yeah, but if you think about the ergonomics of your wrist, or would you just go like, hey, that inspires you, so
I mean, it depends. If as you said, they're not hurting themselves, then I'm not worried about it. To me, like a big thing, and I'm sure I'm gonna get a ton of hate for this. I have in the past. My perspective is like, as long as you sound good and you're not hurting yourself, I don't care how you're hitting the drums.
Sure.
But I do think that there is going to be diminishing returns in like the way that you set up your drums, particularly relative to where your seat height is, right? Mm-hmm. Like a good example too is there's an interesting trend I've been seeing recently of people doing stack cymbals and then angling it away from them. But if you have that cymbal really low, you catch the edge at the right angle if you're seated up really high. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like you're not gonna come at it at a 90-degree angle. You're gonna get like that really shallow angle and catch the edge, and it's gonna be like an appropriate place to hit the drum.
Yeah.
So I mean, for the record, I'm team flat snare and floor tom all day. I'm team flat rack tom, but I sit higher than most. I keep my range of wrist motion.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Chris?
So when I first started touring pretty extensively in the U.S., I remember going out on the road, and every band we played with was setting their drum kit up like every Warped Tour drummer with flat everything. And I was a little bit older than I guess most of the drummers that we were playing with, and I was already pretty dialed in on my setup. Like I said in a previous conversation, I've kind of had the same setup for like 30-something years at this point. And I remember like finishing that tour and coming home and trying to set up my drums to look cool. I know that sounds really lame, but like I would walk outside my drum kit, look at it, try to set it up like it looked like a Warped Tour kit, go back around, try to play it, hated it over and over again. I tried it so many times to look cool. Couldn't do it. And my stuff is pretty angled. Not like Lars Ulrich angled, but pretty angled. Like my floor tom definitely sits on a slight angle. My snare is on a slight angle. My rack tom definitely is. For me, it's a comfort thing. I don't even know if it's a wrist appropriate angle or height, or I know like I've always sat really low and really had bad posture. And as I've gotten older, I definitely had to keep that in mind. Definitely have raised my stool. I think I used to go shopping for drum thrones based upon which drum throne can go the lowest possible. And I sat on a drum throne where the legs were like glued. The little feet were glued and taped because they were so destroyed. Kind of the metal rod was kind of pushed through them. But I loved that drum throne because it sat so low. And the drum throne was basically cardboard by the end. It was so bad. But I think I agree with Eric. Whatever you're comfortable with and you're not hurting yourself and you can play to your full potential, go ahead, knock yourself out. I don't know.
Why is it that flat stuff looks cooler?
It looks so cool. I wanted an Orange County drum kit with like orange lugs and blue stars and flat everything. I just couldn't do it. I was just, yeah.
I view it as a fashion trend. If you went to the 80s, it was all about sitting low and having your drums basically vertical, you know? But like, so you have to do like the tiniest level of adjustment from like hitting the center of the head versus doing a rim shot, right?
Yeah.
Based on how high you sit.
I sit pretty high, and actually right now I'm using a 20-inch kick so that it's like bebop sizes essentially. My Power Tone Rogers is a 10, 12, 14, so the floor tom's 14, and it's a 20-inch kick. So I can actually have my rack toms pretty low, and because I do like them to be relatively straight. But going back to what Chris was saying, to me it's more about feel. Maybe it's only about feel because I've been so used to it, because obviously I grew up with Travis Barker and the Warped Tour drummers, so that's where I got it from. I mean, full disclosure.
Well, but that's kind of what I'm getting at, is at the height that you sit at, right? If you come down on that drum, it's like as close to hitting the rim as possible without hitting the rim, right?
Well, I hit the rim a lot too.
Well, but in an
everything
ideal,
I want to happen happens.
But that's going to give you the most rebound coming at it from that angle, right?
Yeah.
So based on how high you sit, where your arm positioning is, it's comfortable for you to come at it at that angle. Yeah. And I haven't heard from Chris yet, but I'd be willing to bet that with how low he sits and the way his drums are angled, I bet it's a similar thing where it's just the tiniest little drop in your hand to catch a rim shot versus just a dead center of the drum hit.
It's funny. It's before playing Winnetka. I think every single snare drum hit I've ever had was always rim shotted. Every single one.
Same, yeah.
And now I'm pretty mindful of that. Some songs it does kind of require it, but for the most part, I'm hitting in the center. I think the biggest challenge for me is I've always played a 5.5 deep snare, and now I'm on a 6.5, and that's been a little bit of an adjustment. I do notice sometimes I use the Gibraltar hardware, and that I feel like that stuff, the folding of the legs on those stands, I use the lightweight stuff, and the folding of the legs sometimes is a little bit varied, and that'll throw me off on a show if I'm not the right height. But I'm still, I still angle. I angle the snare a tiny bit also, like a tiny bit.
It's just so annoying that toms that are flat look cooler. Like, why? Because I know that probably I could be a way better drummer if I actually set up to where, like, I know what you're saying, Eric, but like, I bet if I tilted them a little bit, I would be able to flow better. But I don't know why. It's just when I look at pictures, I'm like, God, why? I could have made it flatter.
I think it's because we see those Craigslist posts of people selling drum kits and the toms are all angled. We're like, that's horrible.
Yeah, you
Real drummers know that it should be flat.
Exactly. That's true. I'm going to screw this person over because they're actually not a drummer is what I think. All right, let's do a few more just to milk a few episodes out of this. If you don't know what the singer is singing, your take won't suit the song. Eric seems very deep in thought on this. You farted. I couldn't tell.
They're not mutually exclusive, all right? That's I did a remote session recently where I recorded everything without having any vocals in it, and it was so hard. It was like the most stressful recording situation I've ever done. And I had to do so many edits because I was like, I don't know what section of the song I'm in. So I do.
Wow.
There's for sure a big thing here that I think is true. It's if there's a song that's vocally driven, like it's going to be the most important thing in the song. That seems really obvious, but but anything pop with vocals in it is going to, like, we have to, we're subservient to the vocals, right? That's going to be our job as an accompaniment instrument, is to make sure that everybody else feels great and that we're showcasing what needs to be showcased. And 9 times out of 10, it's the vocals. Yeah, I had a hard time doing that session. It worked out, I think. But
so when you were editing it afterwards, were you editing it around the vocals, or did you have to edit it just like when they're like, well, here's the structure, now go? Or how'd you send it off?
So it was, I like sent my takes out, and then I got feedback being like, can you do a fill here? Because that's not where the bridge starts or whatever, right? It was just harder for me to absorb what the structure was without hearing the vocals. And like, it was just an interesting experience because I typically operate vocals first. That's my priority. That's the first thing that I listen to. So to have none of that information going into it, I was like,
if they didn't give me that, I'd be like, hey, here's the you chop it up however the hell you want it, but this is the take you're getting, because you did not set me up for success on this, and that's why I don't get hired back. So that's why I have a podcast.
I made note that I definitely need vocals next time, but yeah.
What's your take on that, Chris?
I'm going to come at it from more of the live perspective. My personal linear mix is just a lot of lead vocal, a little bit of guitar, a little bit of playback, drums, click. I pretty much drown everything else out. No bass, no keys. It is a pretty important part for my playing to follow the lead vocal.
What do you mean by follow?
To kind of know where I am in the song.
Oh, that way. Okay.
Yeah. I will get pretty lost otherwise.
I thought you meant like rhythmically follow it and make sure you're complimenting it.
No, I don't care about that.
No, I just literally am hanging on for dear life.
I'm like a wind-up monkey. Just hit play and just go. But I also kind of interpreted that question a different way too. The way I thought of it is like, are you able to play on a song where you don't understand the lyrics or don't understand what the singer's trying to convey or don't care about it? I don't know. I mean, I guess if depends what facet you're involved in the project. If you're the band drummer, then I guess that's kind of a bummer for you to be playing on a track like that. If you're a hired guy, it's just another day of work, and you're going to want to do the best job possible. And I'm sure it's a hurdle and an obstacle to have something you're fully not invested in, and also might be more difficult to lay a part down where you're a little confused or not super into it. Yeah, I guess it's just not inspiring at all. I guess the vocals and the melody and the actual lyrics are just such an integral part of a song that if it's not good, it's kind of a bummer. So,
yeah, I'm going to quote Liberty DeVito, famously played with Billy Joel for a while. And he was talking about, I once asked Dino Danelli how he came up with playing the conga drum on the #1 hit by the Rascals, Groovin'. He said the song's about sitting on the grass in a park with the sunshine, beautiful weather, and the one you love. He said he'd be playing a conga drum if he was there, and he wouldn't bring a full-size drum set to the park. So he learned that whatever you choose to play, make sure it fits the story and the mood the writer is trying to capture. So Dino Danelli recently passed away, but R.I.P., but a great drummer that obviously served the song, and that was a great point. It just congas. That's not the whole song.
Liberty DeVito's from the town I grew up in, and he's in the Wikipedia for the town, and I'm not. So
why hasn't Matt changed that?
I wouldn't have him edit because he'd have something crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Let's finish off this episode with a controversial topic, probably because 2 people of the 3 work for a company, but people that post advice on how to get drum endorsement deals should really stop. And so that just got me into wanting to talk about drum endorsements and the current state of affairs. So who wants to go first?
I do know just from, I guess, kind of inside baseball that since the pandemic, the endorsement vibe has just completely changed. I know companies have restructured, they've looked at the bottom line, and I think getting quote-unquote endorsed by companies is very difficult, more difficult than it's ever been. The idea of free gear, discounted gear is kind of gone away. It's very scarce.
Let alone being paid to be an artist, yeah.
Being paid to be an artist, I mean, that's mind-blowing to me at this point. It's awesome. I mean, the people who can get that, like, I get it. Like, if you're a clinician and you're touring around using gear and promoting gear, great, good for you. If you're a massive drummer playing arenas and stadiums and football fields, awesome. And they're giving you a paycheck, great. I know that was a thing in, like, the 80s and 90s. Like, dudes were getting paid, like, a lot of money to play Sabian cymbals or whatever. So I've spoken about endorsement stuff. We've spoken about endorsement stuff before, I guess, in some other podcast things we've done. We make fun of it a lot on our Instagram. Actually, we're due for a good Instagram, like poking the bear endorsement deal. I've definitely found one before where it's a printer printing out a piece of paper that goes directly into a paper shredder. And I think we've labeled it like, your endorsement has been received. Thank you for your submission.
Endorsement criteria submission form, yeah.
So I was lucky enough to play in a pretty big band, I guess, God, it's 10 plus years ago. And it's such a weird thing. So when you're at the point of finally being able to afford gear and go to a store and pick out whatever you want, then the stuff is free. It's such a weird, juxtaposition to be in, because you almost feel like weird and guilty. You're like, all right, I can totally go buy this kit because I'm getting a nice paycheck to play in this band. But now everybody's giving me everything for free. So we speak about it a lot, and I guess the idea of an endorsement is you're like a commercial. You're like a walking, talking, playing commercial for that company. There's a lot of responsibility, I think, that comes along with it, and a lot of, I guess, like added pressure and work that comes along with being an endorsed drummer. And I think it's thrown around pretty loosely, and I think it's a way that people can basically add status to their profile and add, I guess, legitimacy to their profile. The only reason I've ever wanted any kind of drum company endorsement is just the support. I'm more than happy to pay for my drums. I'm more than happy to pay for my cymbals. I've been a Gretsch artist for 10 plus years also now. Full disclosure, I got a free kit from them when I first signed with Gretsch. And since that time, I have literally bought all my drums from either like Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist or Reverb. I just play all vintage Gretsch. And the nice thing about them is that I do have a rep over at Gretsch. And you know what? I just needed some parts for a new bass drum that I just purchased from Facebook Marketplace, and I was able to get parts. And you know what? Somebody returns my email, and then doing a fly date at the beginning of September, and I can say like, hey, I'm a Gretsch artist. I need this Gretsch kit for the show. Great. So more locally with our company, it's we get a lot of people that apply for endorsements. I would say probably, I don't know, what do you think about this, Ben? But I would say probably 50% of the time that people apply for the endorsement, we kind of browse their Instagram, and there's not a sign of our product anywhere on any of their posts, and they've never tried it. If I've seen a video of it and I like what it does, and it's like, I don't know, maybe spend the $20, try it first, and then if you think, we can support you, you could support us, then maybe let's talk.
I feel like people get so obsessed on chasing the clout side of things that it's just about having the sort of recognition of a company behind you, and it's not about the gear anyways. Like for me, it's I'm not interested in trying to reach out to anybody that I don't already love, and if they said no to me, I would buy their stuff anyways.
Yeah.
Like all the companies that I play right now, and I have like 2 endorsements. I would play all of these companies anyways, whether or not they supported me or not. So to me, I think that should be the key aspect if you're someone who's looking for it, I guess. But then, the same thing is you also have to be at a point where you need the support and you have something to offer on your end as well. It should be a relationship. Like the amount of people who just go in totally blind with no experience with the company they're reaching out to. Don't reach out to Tama when you have a Pearl drum kit, right?
Yeah, it's also like people need to be realistic. A lot of people reach out and say, hey, I play drums in this band, so I'm a touring drummer. That's why I need the discount and stuff. It's like, our stuff's made for touring drummers. Like, this is going to sound aggressive, but it's like, congratulations, you're our target audience base. That doesn't mean that you are due a discount, I am really picky when it comes to who we officially endorse, because it's a business thing. And we could post one video of a drummer that sounds amazing using our product that no one knows, and that video could get 500,000 streams just because it sounds so good. It's like, just because you're a popular drummer doesn't mean we quote unquote need you. And it's the people really just start to get this convoluted, I'm on a big tour with a band, but I at the end of the day, it's like how many people are actually going to go to the concert, see you play, and then want to go buy a big fat snare drum? It's like the people that we gravitate more towards and want to send gear to and have fun with and be creative with are the people that know how to get good sounds and are doing their thing and make people go, oh my God, yeah, I want to, you know what I mean? It's not about just who you're playing with or your profile. It's are you actually creating a sound that people want to get? And that's chase that, not clout.
So here's something that I'm curious about, because you guys would have better insight on it than I would. What role does social media play into this versus touring? Like, is it more exciting to have someone who's got 100,000 followers on social media than the person who has 200 followers but is playing drums for, Taylor Swift or whatever?
It's always a blend of both,
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to say, yeah. We get excited for either
Sure.
one.
But there are some drummers, and I won't name them, that are very successful on Instagram and TikTok that we could easily send stuff and they could get a lot of eyes, but there's some people that were like, I don't necessarily want to be associated with that account or whatever vibe they're putting off. So that isn't it. I mean, we've said no thanks to people. Maybe Chris doesn't know this, but he respects my opinion on it. But there are some times I'm like, yeah, this might not be the most business decision when it comes to actually moving units, but like I just don't want to be. I don't want them to say, hey, thanks for the gift, big fat snare. I don't want that, because I think that's a bad look. So usually I have to, at the end of the day, it has to be, do we dig your playing, or there has to be something about your playing that just tickles our fancy. I don't think me and Chris ever send stuff out to drummers that we just don't understand what's going on, nor do we understand why anyone would care what they would have to do,
I mean, not that I would think it's this way, but it's cool to hear that it's not a clout chasing thing on your end either. It's not you guys looking for, oh, this guy has, 8 million followers or is on the biggest tour in the world. It's cool to hear that it's a relationship being approached from both sides of the spectrum when it's like the most ideal scenario.
I was going to say there's also times too where it's just like the person could have like 4 followers and I'm like, oh, I'm a fan. I'm actually a genuine fan of this person. They use our stuff and I'm like, oh, cool. They did something really cool with blah, blah, blah product. I'm going to send you some other stuff to check out because I just like what you do. And there's definitely been times where like we've sent stuff to like Steve Gadd, and Steve Gadd's like a ghost on socials. We're just fans. And it's like, in my brain, somebody like that, I mean, he's not like an artist at all. And we wouldn't even approach somebody like that to be like, hey, do you want to be an artist? But it's just cool. Like the way I justify it and the way I think it's something interesting for the company is that if he just brings those to a studio and he plays them at some studio and some guy's like, whoa, Steve Gadd has the coolest thing I've ever seen. Or Steve tells like one of his, drummer buddies that's like 95 years old, like, you got to check out this cool thing that they're doing, Well,
and we just thank you to Ash Sohn if he's listening, but he's been a really good proponent of our Cowmoo heads, and he even used them when he went to the BMI studio or EMI studios, which is what people know as Abbey Road, and he did a whole picture in there, and then he introed us to like the head engineer at Abbey Road, and of course we're like, this is, we say the Ringo sound, so of course we want to send. And the guy was like, I have no, like the head of Abbey Road was like, oh, we don't do socials, we're not going to be able to promote you guys. And it's like, we don't care. It's just like, this is all about like, our company is built on the vibe you created. And if drummers come in there and they see big fat snare drum in Abbey Road, so like we really focus on the experience of the actual drummer walking in a room. That relationship that they see with this engineer and they see the heads there is way more beneficial to us than thousands of people seeing some person playing online. It's so we do focus on a lot of those, what the people don't see, relationships and environments to put ourselves in, if that makes sense.
Sure.
There's a lot of me and Ben going like, we don't care.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. Yeah, that's okay. Oh, good for you. That's great. Good for you. I'm glad you have this going on and that going on. I don't care.
Yeah, drummers are delusional in a lot of ways.
And we have somebody right now that I think that they maybe applied a couple of days ago that just was like super delusional about, yeah, you know what? Like I still treat the business, I still get up every day and I'm hungry and I don't take anything for granted, and I'm always trying to push the business as hard as I can and get new artists and get the product into as many people's hands as possible. But it's also like the attitude, if you're going to go out and you're going to try to make relationships and get endorsements from different companies, don't approach it with the vibe of like, I'm hooking you guys up. And that was the vibe of the last artist that we had this week. And right away, within 30 seconds of me reading his endorsement application, I was completely turned off. Actually, I don't think he even filled out the application. I think he just emailed us and just kind of like, I could do this for your company. Be like, good for you. I don't care.
Thank God you emailed us.
Yeah. So that's a good. I mean, I spent a lot of time before this company, and actually, it's funny. It was a lot of the relationships I made and the research I did was beneficial to starting this company, and I didn't know at the time that this would be coming to fruition. But I mean, I've always approached, even when I was playing in some higher profile gigs, I've always approached it as like starting a relationship with the company. Be like, hey, do you have a loaner that I could try? Do you have one that I can borrow? Do you have any artist pricing? I would never be like, I want this for free. I need this. And it was always about building a relationship. There was times where like my parents' house went through Hurricane Sandy and like a ton of my gear got destroyed. And at the time I was using Elisa's drum pads, and like, I told Elisa's, I'm like, hey, I'm leaving for a tour. Everything I had got ruined. They're like, cool, we'll send you another one. But that's a relationship that I cultivated. And then you know what I did? I made like a nice little post about using Elisa's drum pads on tour. I think it's a two-way street for sure that I think people forget. And I think people, I'm not taking away from the social media drummer. I know it's a ton of work to get out there, and I know they are very beneficial to our company, but at the same time, you still got to work for it. And I think it's in the approach, and it's in the like those 10% of building the long-term relationship, and not seem like, what can you do for me right now, right here, right now. It's like the long-term. I want to grow with you. I want to grow with your company. I want to help spotlight your product, your company, as much as I can. And then in return, hopefully we can work out something where you're supporting me as an artist, supporting me as a drummer, supporting me touring, supporting me recording, I think it's a two-way street. And I think if you're going to go into it with the approach of like, I'm God, I'm going to post one thing about your company and then everybody's going to care about it. I mean, that does not happen, and nobody cares.
Yeah, and it's not surprising. Some of the biggest drummers that have been around the longest, when they email us, are I don't want to say surprisingly, they are the nicest people. And there's so many times where that's why I love working with Chris, is that it reaffirms that like, no, nice people are the ones who make it. The emails we get, or the conversations I see with Chris, CC'd and other things from years ago, it's always, this is a very small industry. I was also going to say that the relationships you make with one company, and I mean, we're all human, and a lot of the people that work in the drum industry know each other. And so if you flip-flop from brand to brand, or just have a bad relationship with an artist rep, I mean, I'm not saying we're gossip queens, but we all talk to each other. Everyone knows. There's been a few times where we have different tiers for our artists, like any endorsement program has. And I'm just going to throw out arbitrary numbers here. But say I get back to an artist and I'm like, hey, we'd love to support you. It's the beginning of their career, maybe what we believe in them. Here's the 30% discount. And they'll get back to us and be like, could you do 40? And it's like,
that's like $3.
Exactly. Our product is $20 generally. Yeah. It's just, you got to navigate it. I mean, it's not just about being a good drummer. It's like, if you're going to even venture into the endorsement conversation, if you think your career is at that point, good for you. I hope if you have the confidence in that, either you have it, like you have a good career, or good for you for having the confidence. But make sure that from the day you start jumping and dipping your toes into the endorsement conversations, that you have integrity, you're realistic, and that you're good on your word, because word travels fast.
It's funny, too, exactly what you said about the industry being so small, is that my original rep for Gretsch then left Gretsch and then was at Gibraltar for a while, became my Gibraltar rep, and then he left Gibraltar, and now he works for Hercules Guitar Stands. But I've kept the relationship with him for so many years. Now we're like a Hercules Guitar Stands endorsed band.
Exactly. When that also means that's another reason for an artist rep to be so cool, too, because then that person can get you sales later on in your career when There's this quote, I forget who it was, but it was, be really nice to people on the way up, because you might have to pass them when you're on your way back down.
For sure, yeah.
So
love that.
Always, and I'm not going to say I'm a saint in that regards either, but it's something to remember.
I mean, early on when I started touring, I still have, it's funny, I have like a folder and like a subfolder in my main email box of like all the drum stuff. And the products that I still use live, I'm still in contact with all those people, 10, 15 years later. And it's, I use the Kelly Shoe internal like mic suspension system, and I just switched kick drums. I just switched from a 22 down to a 20. I just shot an email to Jeffrey, who's the owner of the company, and he's like, yep, what do you need? And I wasn't even looking for a discount. I just said, hey, I'm switching sizes. Like, I see on your website there's a bunch of products. Like, I need to do an internal flat mic, and I need to do whatever. I use a Sennheiser 602 mic. I'm like, what do I need? I need to just refresh the current setup that I have. And he's like, you need this, this, and this. Here's an invoice. Cool. I'm happy paying that because you're doing me a solid. And then, yeah, I'm still an artist. But you know what? That's exactly what I was saying before. It's the support. It's like you can email somebody. They can pick the phone up. They're going to, respond back to an email. They're going to help you they're going to help you push your career as well, too, if it's all reciprocated.
Yep.
I'm getting really tired. I can't believe I can get the word reciprocated out.
I feel like people forget that everyone who's in this industry is in it because they are drummers and they love playing and listening to drums and being around music. It's cool to hear how the way other people's playing inspires you is enough to kick off a relationship. It's about being cool personally. It's about making musical connections. Like it's all the things that we're musicians in the first place are the foundations of everyone at every company, right? I mean, like, I imagine A&R at every company in music, they're all musicians, right? They're all here because they love music and they're fans and they want to connect with people who feel the same way they do.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know your endorsements, and so I don't necessarily want this to be a bad thing in anyone's direction. But me and Chris consciously have talked about not wanting to be in the list of those endorsed by at this company, this company, this company, and this company, which when I see that on a drummer's profile, it almost delegitimizes them. Not because those products are bad, mind you. Yeah. 3 of the 4 products that I'm talking about, I do use when I need to get certain sounds out. But that endorsement from that company is something that's like a joke almost. Yeah. And so we don't want to be in that category because we want people to know that, oh, this guy's a big fat snare drum artist. It means that they've done their homework, that this is a rad artist. Mm-hmm. And so while we may not promote every artist all the time and only post their stuff, I try and only endorse people that I'm like, no, we're proud. If you're an endorsement, that's like a bunch of people in our camp being like, yeah, you're super awesome. And that's worth more than us always just endorsing everyone and having our name around all over the place. Yeah. That means shit to me. That's a money grab. But if you want to have any sort of longevity, you have to think about kind of like what Chris always says is, what would Kurt Cobain do? Like, what would Kurt do? And kind of, love that. It's all about integrity, and everyone has their own opinions on him and if he wanted to get famous or not. But for the most part, that's always led us in the at least timeless direction.
I low-key love to hear that you guys have a similar visceral reaction to people having endorsed by yada yada in their bio that I do.
I'm being very diplomatic about it, but I think anyone who knows what I'm talking about knows exactly who I'm talking about.
Everybody knows. But you know what, though? With that being said, too, I mean, you're talking about the longevity. That particular company's been doing it for a long time. So I don't know. Yeah. I mean,
you're right.
Yeah,
it's not our clientele, and it's not. The cheese factor is just cringe for me. I couldn't deal with it, but I mean, they're doing something. I don't know. Behind closed doors, they might be bankrupt every 5 minutes, but who knows? I mean, if they're making it and their business model works, I mean, there's actually more than one company that I'm thinking of that's doing that. Yeah. But I'm
thinking 5. Yeah.
5. Yeah. So, yeah, that's probably about 5 at this point. But yeah, they're doing their thing. It's not the path that we want to go down, But and that Kurt Cobain line is Tim Pagnotta is a producer. He's the one who said that. I stole that from him, so I don't want to take credit.
Yeah, Tim's the shit. Sugar Cult, lead singer, songwriter of Sugar Cult, produced Walk the Moon, produced Neon Trees, produced so many amazing artists. And if people don't know, Tim, I believe actually was the reason it's called Big Fat Snare Drum, right?
It is, yep.
you want to retell that story real quick, and then I'll let you guys go?
Yeah. When I was starting it up, it had just a bunch of dumb names. It was like Snare Heads with a Z, and I don't even know. It was called like...
I don't even think I knew that.
Oh, yeah. I bought the domain at some point. Hopefully...
Oh, we have to use that now.
Ugh, I actually have a logo somewhere of it. And then it was called Big Ass Snare Drums. And then when I was starting to do some research and like talking to companies about starting this company, they all said that you can't do that. The mom and pop shops won't carry your product. Guitar Center won't carry your product because of the profanity in it. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And so I was really struggling to find the name. Just couldn't come up with anything. And basically was at Tim's studio in California, and anytime I would go to his studio, he would pick my brain like, oh, I'm having this lug loosen up, or this is farting out, and what's this, and he was complaining about doing a session, and I think he had like a Ludwig, a Superphonic that was pretty old, and it just kept losing the tune between takes, and they had to go back and match the pitch of the snare drum between takes. And I guess it was a pretty tedious process. And I said, well, why don't you just crank the drum up to a tuning where it sits comfortably without the lugs, detuning. And I'm like, just give me an old drum head. I took an old drum head, cut it out. I literally made like a makeshift gasket with some gaffer's tape. And I put it on the drum, and he's just like, whoa, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen. I've never seen this trick before. You need to figure this out and make it a company. And I'm like, Mike, dude, it's not going to happen. I thought I was just going to make a couple of them for friends and just have this funny little Etsy vibe company. And I think a few months later, at that point, I was already starting to get some prototypes made and kind of get it off the ground. And Tim was just like, dude, whatever happened with that big fat snare drum company you're starting? And I was like, oh, there you go.
And there you go.
He accidentally named it. I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. So probably
awesome.
probably 11-ish years ago. 10.
And the
10.
litigation has been going on the entire 11 years, or is it?
Tim owns 97% of the company, so
That's why my paychecks are shit. I see. Okay.
I'm living off 3%.
Exactly. All right. Well, I think that's a good place to end it. A little promo for Big Fat Snare Drum, and.
Oh, wait, we haven't started yet? This is...
Oh, yeah. Chris, if you could push record now, that'd be great. And that's the show. If you're listening on a platform that allows ratings and reviews, do that. It helps more people find the show, so it'll get bigger and better, and hopefully I'll have a chance to sell out one day. But you'll be an OG listener that can brag to all your friends. Anyways, why don't you go and check us out at bigfatsnaredrum.com and follow us on all the socials. Just search for Big Fat Snare Drum and you will find us. The show is edited in part using iZotope RX Audio Editor. It's amazing, so go check that out at iZotope.com. And thanks again to Gunnar Olsen for the theme music. Bye!